Welcome back to Let's Read, the internet's most infamous channel for horrifying and paranormal experiences. On today's episode, we have for you 3 unnervingly true extraterrestrial encounters. Joining us today is our own personal friend and field investigator, Neverodd, to unravel these immersive stories. Nick, take it away.
September 2nd, 1987. I left Cross River, where I lived, and headed up the North Canal Road by myself on my motorbike for moose hunting. I was planning on spending 3 days in the area between Sheldon Lake and Mac Pass. A guy I worked with and a friend of his were to leave a day later, and I was to meet them for some fishing. We were all to stay at a trailer at Dewhurst Creek. I left Ross River early in the morning and the temperature started to drop. Then it started to rain very hard and very cold. When I got to Gravel Creek, I stopped at Art John's cabin and put on some extra clothes while standing under the edge of his roof. I knew the rain would not stop, so I got back on my bike and headed off. I arrived at the trailer half an hour before dark, very cold and very tired. I lit up a fire, cooked supper, and went straight to bed looking forward to a hunting trip. Overnight, the rain had stopped. At daybreak, September 3rd, I put on my gear and my gun on my bike and headed towards Mac Pass. A couple of miles down the road, I was putting along at about 10 miles an hour looking into the trees and watching the hillside. I decided to stop for a restroom break. I stopped where I could see some mountainsides and some valleys. I parked on the right side of the road. The sun was shining, the air was perfectly still and a bit cool. I was standing just in front of my bike watching the mountains to the south when I noticed to the left out of the corner of my eye what I first thought was an airplane. It was 400 to 500 yards away and about the size of a DC-3 plane or a full-size school bus. It was traveling north to south at about 40 yards above ground and moving maybe 30 kilometers an hour. Right away I thought, boy, is he low. I blinked my eyes because I couldn't make out a tail fin or wings. It had what looked like portholes all along the side of it. It was cigar-shaped with a gray strip down the middle and dark green on the top and bottom. I thought to myself, something's wrong with this picture. Then I realized there was no sound. If it was an airplane, the roar would have filled the sky. As I watched, it seemed to partially dematerialize and then return to solid form. It did this as if it was moving a couple of times, and then it dawned on me. I don't think I should be seeing this. It's a UFO and probably doesn't want to be seen. I crouched down the road, hiding behind the roadside grass, and then watched it go behind a cone-shaped hill and not come out. I stood up looking for it and feeling very excited and happy about what I saw and thinking they didn't even know they were being watched. I was standing beside my bike when I heard a loud metallic chunk behind me around the corner. Right away I thought, somebody must be here and I've got to tell them what I saw. The noise I heard sounded like a heavy trunk lid on a car slamming shut. I quickly walked along the edge of the road to the corner to see who was there. I came face to face, about 20 yards away, with 2 gray creatures in blue jumpsuits, about 5 feet tall with big insect-looking heads, pointy faces, big eyes, thin arms, body and legs. I immediately thought, they're not little green men. They're like grasshopper people. At that same distance, the one on the left raised his left hand to the waist, which held some type of flashlight device, and I saw a bright flash of light come from it. Next thing I knew, I was standing on the side of the road, scared, shaking, and confused. Within seconds, I remembered all of that had just taken place, and I thought, I'm getting out of here before they get me. I turned around to get my bike, and for some reason it was not there. Then I noticed it was on the other side of the road. I said to myself, what the hell is this? I didn't put that there. Still panicking, I rushed over and got on it and realized the keys were gone. I always left the keys in it. That way I could not lose them while sneaking around in the bush. I immediately started looking down the road and suddenly saw them in my hand. I started my bike and raced back to the trailer. I was feeling scared and amazed at the same time, and then noticed that all the shadows of the trees were pointing in a direction different than that of the morning sun. About 15 minutes later, I was at the trailer. Half an hour later, it was dark. I thought, no way. I only left here an hour ago. What the hell's going on? I was really confused, then I said to myself, I'm not telling anybody about this. I'll just forget the whole thing. I put on a pot of coffee and could then hear a soft humming sound above the trailer. I could also feel a soft vibration in everything, trailer, air, etc. After about 10 minutes it had all stopped. I had a very strong feeling that they were outside. I did not look out the windows. Later that night I still couldn't sleep, and while having my coffee, I began to have flashbacks of the past events. I remember being in a dreamlike state, watching scenery flash by underneath, as if I was flying. I watched mountainsides and rivers and forests go by at a very high rate of speed. I then became aware of other sounds and seemed to wake up. I opened my eyes and could see nothing but black, very deep and inky black. As I was looking at this, the blackness pulled back, revealing a face. I had been looking into the eyes of a gray-type creature. I could hear in my mind a voice saying, "There is nothing to worry about." I could hear him talking in my mind. There were 3 or 4 of these types walking around, but only one talked to me. The 2 I saw earlier on the road, I never saw again. Note, the aliens that he saw at this point were of the typical gray type, while the ones at the edge of the road were more insectoid. I then set up and had an idea of what might be going on, and I asked, "Are you going to do experiments on me?" And the one said, "They've already been done." I felt really good then because, except for a strange sensation in my hands, everything felt normal. I kept rubbing my hands together but did not look at them, as there was a totally strange environment to look at instead. I experienced no discomfort. The being nearest me asked if I would like to see my home planet, and I said sure, and then walked over to the window, where there was a machine that looked like a big copy machine. He asked me not to touch it. I replied, "Don't worry, I'm not touching anything in here." He then said, "That bright white star is your home." I didn't know anything about astronomy at the time, but I always thought Earth was blue. So right away I thought, he's lying. He also explained to me about space and stars, etc., but I can't remember any of it now. I was also asked if I would like to go on a trip. I replied, "Not yet." I felt very honored to be asked, and I did want to go, but I felt that the time was not right. And then I was told I would have to forget all of this. I was disappointed at hearing this. The first part of the experience was very scary, but once I was with him, I found them to be friendly, helpful, and their looks didn't bother me. They actually seemed like old friends. They gave me a clear glass, 3/4 full of yellow liquid, and said to drink it up. It would make me forget everything. I told them I did not want to forget an experience like this. It should be remembered. I was told it was for my own good that I forgot, so I took 3 little sips and put the glass down. Next thing I know, I'm on the road by my bike, scared to death and wanting to get out of there. The next day I met up with the other 2 guys and never said anything to them. On August 2nd, 2005, the witness called saying that he had just awakened and was very, very thirsty, even after drinking several bottles of water, and wanted to tell me about what had happened to him. He said that at 1 a.m., he watched about 10 minutes of the news broadcast and had an overwhelming urge to go out into the backyard. He saw an orange light above the retention pond. He said that the object that he saw was the same one that he saw over the Gulf, but it was straight across, not tilted, and about 200 to 300 feet in the air. It was like a straight bar and pointed at the end. The surface was orange, pulsating, beautiful, flowing like water. There were 3 squares, then a space, and then 3 more squares. It looked so large that he estimated that it could be covered by a blanket unfolded. He saw it for about 45 seconds, and then it completely vanished. The night was silent, with even the crickets not making noise. He found it hard to get back inside the house. He called me at 3:52 a.m., but thought it was earlier, about 1:20 a.m. There was missing time of 2 hours and 42 minutes, during which apparently an abduction took place. Thomas became very thirsty after this, drinking 4 or 5 16-ounce bottles of water at once. He later suffered from vomiting, diarrhea, and inability to urinate. None of his neighbors had seen the object. On August 4th, he noticed a slight burning sensation on his chest and discovered a small red triangle just below the skin. His doctor didn't know what it was, but didn't think it was anything to worry about. The doctor did find that his triglycerides were dangerously high, 410. Normal levels are 40 to 200, and said that he could be at risk for a stroke or heart attack. The doctor also found that his electrolytes were extremely low, and advised him to drink Pedialyte and to eat only fruits and vegetables. His family had gone to Cape Canaveral to see the space shuttle return. At a lunch with the astronauts, Thomas's niece asked about drinking Tang. The astronaut said that they no longer drank it, but used a different formula because they had found that weightlessness caused a decrease of electrolytes in the human body. This may be significant to Thomas because his electrolytes were very low after an apparent abduction. The witness was fearful of a little girl with dark eyes in the doctor's waiting room because her eyes made him afraid, as did people who wore sunglasses. Date: 1966. I'm 7 years old and I'm lying in a cot in my cousin's room. His cot is on the other side of the room. It's in the middle of the night and very dark. My cousin and I were on the 3rd floor of a brown wooden apartment tenement. The walls were rough-hewn chocolate brown wood with no sheetrock. You could see daylight out through the cracks. Nothing fancy. My uncle had just started working for the fire department. In the middle of the night, I had awakened when I felt pressure on my cot. I looked down at the foot of my cot and one of them was sitting on it. The other two were standing at the foot of the cot looking at me. There was a faint light emanating from them somehow, so I could barely discern them. The light eventually brightened. Later, much later, even now, I can still recall the beautiful, vivid electric blue hue. They were tiny, thin, gray, no more than 3 feet tall. They looked very fragile. However, I didn't have any fear of them. They communicated to me through telepathy. They didn't say much. All I can remember them saying to me was that not to be frightened, and I wasn't. As I watched, a circle of beautiful, brilliant, and indescribable blue light appeared behind them. I remember one of them going into the light, and I knew this is where I was going too. This entire episode lasted about 3 minutes. I remember falling asleep before they were gone. My cousin never woke up through the entire ordeal. How can I describe them? You've seen them in stickers, pictures, the typical alien. Large heads, black oval eyes, too large in proportion to their heads. A slit for a mouth and 2 small nose holes. Their long, spindly limbs seemed to be frail, yet they were there. When I woke up the next morning, my left pinky finger was aching. I felt what seemed to be a BB of some sort. I knew it wasn't there before. I told my mother about the entire incident, and she beat me severely and would not even consider feeling the BB in my finger. So I suffered in silence for many years. Since then, I've asked my doctor if he'd x-ray my finger, and he said not unless there was a reason to. I didn't tell him why, or he'd probably think I was nuts. I've been x-rayed for chest pains repeatedly, and I have always semi-jokingly asked the x-ray tech if they've ever done alien implant x-rays, or has anyone ever requested one. They'd always laugh and tell me no, but, and I quote, "We found a lot of interesting things in rectums, though." My doctor says the BB in my finger is a fatty deposit, but I disagree, because I knew it wasn't there the night before I saw them. I think it's like a tag. I haven't seen them since, and no, this was not a dream. How could I have known what they looked like at that age? According to my parents and my uncle, I described them perfectly. They were exactly like the ones you see described by thousands of people worldwide. This might sound strange, but I have a feeling, just a feeling, mind you, that they have protected me throughout my whole life. They have caused me to have success. Strange, isn't it? I've never been hurt, or in a car wreck, or received a speeding ticket, or anything like that. Nothing. I think it is very possible that they are monitoring and especially influencing thoughts. When I was a child, after the incident, My mother was amazed at the things I would come up with. I would make innocent predictions. Remember, I was a child then, and they would come true. She was dumbfounded. She said I could predict the future. I think she was afraid of me, and that's why she beat me so much and made me sleep at other relatives' houses.
Well, you don't say that, pal. News to me that UFOs don't want to be seen. Poor me. I'm gonna be in loads of trouble with those peeps.
Hey, you can't leave now. No. You're in it for the big time, my friend. You're in it for the big time, my friend.
Episode, we have for you 3 unnervingly true extraterrestrial encounters. Joining us today is our own personal friend and field investigator, Neverodd, to unravel these immersive stories. Nick, take it away.
September 2nd, 1987. I left Cross River, where I lived, and headed up the North Canal Road by myself on my motorbike for moose hunting. I was planning on spending 3 days in the area between Sheldon Lake and Mac Pass. I knew the rain would not stop, so I got back on my bike and headed off. I arrived at the trailer half an hour before dark, very cold and very tired. I lit up a fire, cooked supper, and went straight to bed looking forward to a hunting trip. Overnight, the rain had stopped. At daybreak, September 3rd, I put on my gear and my gun on my bike and headed towards Mac Pass.
Welcome back to Let's Read, the internet's most infamous channel for horrifying and paranormal experiences. On today's episode,
Worked with and a friend of his were to leave a day later, and I was to meet them for some fishing. We were all to stay at a trailer at Dewhurst Creek. I left Ross River early in the morning and the temperature started to drop. Then it started to rain very hard and very cold. When I got to Gravel Creek, I stopped at Art John's cabin and put on some extra clothes while standing under the edge of his roof.